Hi, everyone. So today's topic is going to be focus and productivity. And I just want to start out by saying, by no means am I an expert. I still struggle with these things from time to time, but these are the things that I know that if I come back to, it always helps me stay centered and grounded. So feel free to ask questions at any time, or if you have your own tips that you'd like to add, I'd love to hear that as well. This is a collaborative event. But I'm super excited to dive in. And I also want to say, I did put numbers by these, but by no means do you necessarily have to go in order. I think when I originally wrote the numbers, I've changed them up like 3 or 4 times. So, and I apologize for those on Instagram. You're not going to be able to see this quite as well, but that's why you can join the webinar if you want. So I want to get started in talking about focus. Why, before you try to hone in and get super productive, making sure that you have the right focus is so important. And I like to start people on focusing on their core values. So what is the most important to them? What are the top 3 things that are most important to them in their life? When you start from there, you can then really start to get a better understanding of, oh, these are the things right now that are important to me. And then for those of you who did the future self exercise last week, we talked about where you want to be in the future. So connecting both the present to the future and then seeing if there are any disconnects, you can fill in those gaps. But it's so important to know those core values so that the goals that you're going to set down the road line up with those core values. There are a lot of people that set a goal because it sounds good. Like, yeah, it sounds good to read a book once a month, but what is the point in reading a book if that's not aligning with what your core values are and the place where you want to be? And I'm not saying reading isn't good, because it is, but you have to be more specific in the goals you set. Next, again, future self, if you're interested in that exercise, DM me, or that is in my bio or on my YouTube channel. If you want to go through that future self exercise, it's so important to think about, where do we want to be in the future? What kind of life do we want to create? Because that's going to shape where you are now and the things that you're spending your time on now. It's easy to make decisions in the moment and say, well, this is going to be so fun for me today, or this is going to move me forward this year, but is it going to move you forward in 5 years, 10 years? Next, number 3 is priorities. So if you guys are like me, and let me know if this is you or not, I'm like, I want to do all the things, right? Like my list of things I want to do and future self things is like, it's like a bucket list, right? It's like 100 things long, but I can't do them all at once. And one of the metaphors I like is there's climbers out there who want to climb the 7 summits. You can't climb them all at the same time, though. You can't climb them all in the same day. You can't climb them in the same month. You have to go one by one strategically. So it's thinking about your plan, thinking about what's most important to tackle, and then how you can go and execute that plan. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I just like that. For me, that mindset helps, is like, you can do all the things, but if you try to do everything at once, it's like squirrel. You're going to be, you're never going to put enough time and effort on anything that matters. So you just might like inch forward, but you're not going to have anything done at the end of the day. Does anyone else struggle with that sometimes? Because I know I certainly do. I'll get so pumped about a project, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait, I need to do this. I need to do this. And it's like, no, hold on. This project has to be my number 1 focus if I want to get it done. And the quote that I included is, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. And it's so true. So it's sticking with those top 3 and just holding them as the most important things for you. Next is intention and outcome. So for those of you following along on the whiteboard, what is the intention behind the goal? What is the outcome that you want? A lot of times, again, coming back to the goal setting, if you don't know what you want to get out of the goal or behind the project, or in that future self, like if you're just saying, oh, in the future, I want to have a big mansion. what is the intention behind that? Like, what is the purpose of having the mansion? Just so you have a lot of rooms? Do you want to fill it with people you love? So trying to connect everything to some intention, and what the outcome truly is so important, because that's going to drive you to and connect you to the goal that you have. Any questions, again, please let me know, and I can answer them as allows, or at the end. So intention and outcome. Intention is so big, and intention is something that Oprah is really big about. She talks about this a lot. I'm doing a meditation right now that her and Deepak Chopra are offering, and it's just everything. If you have an intention for every day and everything that you're doing, you will find the flow of your life becomes a lot easier, because those intentions align, and then the goals you're doing align with your values. So if everything is working together, it's going to be a lot easier to accomplish the goals you want, to create the life you want, et cetera, et cetera. And then last, and this kind of does come after all of those things, then set the goals. And then ask, like, what is the intention behind this goal specifically? Get curious about it. But I think if you start setting goals before you really know your values and where you want to go, it can be very narrow-minded, and you can not necessarily get stuck, but you might just be spinning your wheels and working on a goal without a greater purpose, or a goal that's not moving you forward. If the goal you have is the same goal you've had every year, how is that helping you grow? I'm not saying it's a bad goal, but how can you adjust it to challenge yourself? And when we're setting goals, if we're not scared about them or feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to have to really work for this, the goal probably isn't big enough. Joe and I talked about that when he's like, yeah, I was kind of getting bored with my routine. And so I'm just looking at some of the comments on Instagram here. He was like, I'm getting bored with my routine. And so I set a big goal that was like, I better work out now, or else I'm not going to be able to accomplish this or to do it. So, hey, Talia, it's very important to, when you're setting those goals, be intentional about them, make sure that they're aligned, and you're not just setting the goal to have a goal or have a New Year's resolution. I think New Year's resolutions are one of my biggest pet peeves. I think we should be setting goals and evaluating them, which I'll get to in a second as well, every 90 days. So that's focus, right? You have core values, want to get clear on those. I have a workbook for that if you're interested in going through that. There's future self. There's also, in the workbook, kind of includes future self, what you want to dream, what you want to do. I also have the future self guided visualization, which if you did that, let me know. I'd love to know in the comments your feedback on that, or did you learn anything from your future self? And then again, having that, the priorities right. We can all have a lot of big goals, but what are the ones we want to work on, and in what order? And then the intention, the outcome, maybe like in the business space, I think a lot about ROI, and then finally setting those goals, and just, again, getting very curious about them. So next I want to move to productivity. For those of you, again, I guess on Instagram you can see this now, but you can't see me. So I'm going to shift you guys a little bit. Okay, so priorities. Make a plan. I know this sounds maybe really simple, but there are so many people who set a goal and then they're like, all right, well, like working out is the easiest example for me. So it could be like, I want to get in better physical shape. Well, first you need to get a little bit more specific. If you've heard of SMART goals, like specific, measurable, actionable, measurable, and time bound. So that's a SMART goal. You can Google this. I didn't make it up. But setting SMART goals. And then as far as the plan comes in, so once you have the goals, say the goal is I want to get in better shape. So I want to lose 5 pounds and decrease my body fat by 3%. That's a very specific, measurable goal. Okay, now that's the goal. It might be a SMART goal, but what's the plan to do it? If you're like, oh, I'm just going to work out a little more. Well, what does that mean? How much do you work out now? When are you going to work out? When are you going to go to the gym? I find with a lot of clients and even the sales people that I coach now, it's like, what are how specifically are you going to accomplish the thing you want to do? Because if you leave it up to guesswork, you're going to end up falling off track, because it's very easy to be like, oh, well, I'll just do it tomorrow. But if you know specifically what you need to do every single day, it becomes a lot harder to fall off track. So let me give an example. And if you're not sure how to, I guess I want to get more specific, not necessarily set an example. If you're not sure how to get down to that daily task, set the goal and then say, what is the time bound? What is the frame in which you want to accomplish that goal? So I want to, let's stick with this body one, but just because it's easy to understand. So I want to lose 5 pounds. I think I said 5, 10, whatever. I want to lose 5 pounds and 3% body fat. Okay, well, when do I want to do that? And let's say 3 months. So, okay, well, what's half of that goal in 3 months? So if it's 5 pounds, that's 2.5 pounds and 1.5% body fat. Okay, what's half of that? What's half of that? And you can just keep breaking it down into incremental steps to give yourself an idea of where you need to be along the timeline. So that's the first piece, is breaking the like goal down into chunks so they're very manageable, and you can check in with yourself. How am I doing? And then setting the plan up accordingly as well. So, okay, in order to do this, if you've traditionally been working out, let's say 3 times a week for 45 minutes, that's just going to help you maintain where you're at. So you need to increase the number of times that you're working out and probably increase the intensity. And then you probably need to look at your diet and stuff too. These are just examples of things that you need to do in order to set a goal. Again, this is the example of if you were going to lose weight and get in better shape. But you could apply this to a business. You could apply this. I just made a business plan for my friend, and it was all around like a social posting strategy, and then how many people he was going to talk to a week. So there's all different types of ways that you can set up these plans to keep you on track and keep you on task. Again, when you're guessing, it's not good for anybody. Okay, the second thing is urgency. So I find if you don't set that time frame, it is really hard to get something done. And I am so guilty of this, because I have had on my goal list for probably 5 years, write a book. But it's like, oh, I can just work on that later because it's not in my top 3 priorities. And so then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, I can work on that later. I can work on that later. And 5 years have passed and I have nothing to show for it, but it's still something I want to do. So you have to have urgency around it. That's also why coming back to the no more than 3 goals or 3 priorities at a time is super important. I don't know if you guys agree, but I just find it super hard to focus on, execute, and accomplish more than 3 goals at one time. I'd love to know your feedback. So urgency, making sure that you're working towards it, and accountability is the next piece under priorities. Accountability can help you have that urgency. So some kind of way for you to track, or a person that you trust, that you're like, I don't want to disappoint you and like tell you I didn't hit this goal. So I want to use you as my accountability partner. I hope you have someone in your life like that. And that person can be so powerful for you. And it's got to be someone who's not going to be too lenient on you, and also not super strict, right? Like they can, if they're good, they can help you realize that, okay, maybe if I set this goal for 3 months, like that's just not possible when you're 1 month in. So you might have to adjust a little bit. The next piece on priorities. So we have urgency, accountability, limiting distractions. So the D word that I referenced earlier, distractions, so huge. I think there's so many things that come in, and especially in our world in social media, our phones, we are so tethered to our phones. You can actually look at the number of pickups you have on your phone every day. It's a little scary. I try not to do that when I'm actually working and I'm trying to be super efficient and dialed in. I actually turn my phone over, and if I can, put on Do Not Disturb and literally put it out of sight. So like I put it behind my computer or under a book or something, so that it is not distracting me and preventing me from focusing on what I'm focusing on. And I'm telling you, and I've talked to someone about this recently, that completely changed their ability to focus, because it's not there. You don't have have it to reach for. It's not that distraction sitting right in front of you. What else I like to do for this is use a timer. So break your work into chunks. I think it's called Pomodoro technique, but you can break it into like 20, 25-minute, 30-minute chunks where you're like, okay, I'm going to work on this thing for 25 minutes. You set a timer goes off and you're like, cool, I'm going to take a 5-minute break, maybe get some water, stand up, stretch, whatever. You can break it into longer chunks, like an hour, if you really feel called to do that. But that's, again, I think it's up to everyone individually. That's super helpful. I also find my own mind can be a distraction because I'll be working on something. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have these other 10 things I have to do. So what I encourage people to do is brain dump. If you're in that space and you are thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know, I can't focus on this because I have so many other things going on, or if you're laying in bed at night and it's keeping you awake, do a brain dump. Write down every thought, action, priority, task, whatever that is going on in your head, bouncing around in there on a piece of paper. I don't care if they're all jumbled together, it doesn't have to make sense. Just write it down, because it'll stop it from bouncing around in your head. And literally the act of putting it on paper will help you become more focused, centered. And then sometimes that's enough. The next thing I like to do, especially if I'm thinking about things I need to do for work or different priorities, in that respect, is then all the things that I wrote down, star the very important ones, right? So I'm like, okay, so of the 30 things that I just wrote down, these 7 are super important. And then from those 7, I say like, okay, then now I want to put a number to them, right? Coming back to priorities, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, get very, very specific about what order you're going to accomplish everything in. Again, when you take the guesswork out of the equation for yourself and set a plan, it's so much easier to execute. When you're just like, oh yeah, I'll do that later. That's when we become very distracted, when we can become, that you're bouncing from one task to another. I mean, to me, this whole like, oh, I'm multitasking, like they've proven that's just not effective. And you're not being present in whatever it is you're doing. And I found myself doing this too, where I'm in a meeting, but I'm working on something else because I have a deadline. I'm not listening to what's in the meeting. I ask someone a question and they're like, oh, as I just said, or I've been on the other end of that too, where I'll say, hey, this is what's going on right now. I'll give an overview. And then someone asks me a question of something that I just covered. So ask yourself how often you're present. I know that's kind of an aside, but that is a distraction when we have these thoughts and we have other things we're working on. I actually just wrote on my wall a week or two ago, be present. Like try to say whatever I'm doing it. And that's why I don't always love doing these things on Instagram, because when you're on Instagram, you have a bunch of pop-ups coming. If you're on a webinar, hopefully you can be a little bit more focused and tuned in. I'll talk about this more later. My friend Janie and I were talking about being present and just how powerful it is. And it just enhances the experience of whatever it is you're doing. And you can be more productive. And I've noticed this too in my thoughts and when I'm writing or working on a project. When I am fully present in it, I'm much clearer. My thoughts are more concise versus when I'm jumping around and I'll like write an email. I look back at it and I'm like, like that wasn't even English. What was I saying? But I was on another call. I'm writing an email at the same time, trying to multitask. It just doesn't work. The last thing is measure and review your progress. This is so important. I mentioned it before. You've got to know whether or not you're on track. So you've got to have those incremental goals and then look back and say, how am I doing? Is this working? Like, do I need to adjust how I'm tackling this project, this problem, this goal? Or is it not hard enough? Maybe you need to increase the amount of effort and maybe you need to decrease it. Everything, it's just going to depend on what you're working on, how you're working on, but that is so important. I think it's Peter Drucker has a quote that was, you can't manage what you can't measure. So measurement is super important. For some things it's harder than others, but keeping a journal is very helpful for things like that. So those are the 5 things as far as productivity. I think of efficiency, effectiveness, efficiency, how good are you at getting the thing done? So if you're super efficient, and then is it effective? Is what you're working on actually effective? Coming back to the focus piece, You can have a goal and be crushing it, but what is it driving you towards? So these are so interconnected. Again, the numbers don't really matter. You don't have to follow this process. I do think set goals needs to be last. Get these things a little bit clearer first. And then priority wise, making a plan, having the urgency around that plan. Like if you're not excited and driven to do this, I guarantee it's not going to happen. You're going to give up. It's not going to be important to you. 3, limiting those three is accountability. 4, limiting distractions. And then 5, review your progress and measure yourself. So important. So I'd love to know, that's kind of the recap. That's what I wanted to share with you guys. I'd love to know what your thoughts, what your questions are. Do you have any questions? What is something you're struggling with right now? Do you have a goal that has been sitting on the shelf for 5 years, 10 years? What are things that you know, at the end of your life, if you look back on, you're like, this is what I want to do? Or what are the things, like, I'd also love to know, what are the things that help you become more focused and productive and help you set your priorities? I'd love to know what are those things for you guys, whether it's in the comments or let me know after if it's not live. I just think looking back and reflecting on what's worked for us and what hasn't, or where we've struggled in the past, is just so powerful. That reflection time. That's why I think journaling, I think journaling is powerful no matter what project you're working on, because it gives you an indication of, here's where I am today. Here's where I could have done better. I love the 5-minute journal is a great tool for that. It gives you, I think, 3 things you want to work, your 3 priorities for the day, 3 things you're grateful for at the beginning of the day. And then at the end of the day, it's like, what went well today? What could I have done better today? Hey, Ryan. But I love that reflection, or like setting the intention at the beginning of the day in just 5 minutes. What are the 3 things I need to accomplish today? And at the end of the day, what did I do well? What could have gone better? Super simple. That's the 5-minute journal. I've been using that for, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years pretty consistently. It's just a great routine to get into and to keep you on track. Freeman, hey Freeman, holding yourself accountable is so important and also easy to let slip. Yes, I think that's so true. I think that's why having accountability partners can be so powerful, and it's something outside of yourself. And it has to be someone, again, you don't want to let down, and that will actually hold you accountable. And you have like a check-in, whether it's weekly or maybe daily, depending on what you're doing or what the goal is. I actually got a triathlon coach, and I found that so incredibly helpful, because I was like, he gave me the plan, right? Gave me the plan, so I didn't have to think about what I was going to do or what my workouts were that week. So that was a huge relief. And then 2 was like, I want to do what he said because he sent this to me. And it's not, he wouldn't be mad, but it was like, I just needed to know that someone was paying attention to what I was doing. And I was like, hey, this week I had to pull back because of X, Y, or Z. He's like, no problem, we'll adjust. But that in and of itself, having that coach, that accountability, was huge for me personally in my triathlon training. Also, that's why having coaches is so valuable, not just in sports, but in whether it's for your business, for your personal life, for your finances, like any of that, having that accountability and someone to help you and walk with you down that path is just so powerful. Anything else, you guys, before we wrap up? I know we're just about at 30 minutes. I hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to know takeaways, right? What are you going to change in your life? What's something you've been doing that maybe you need to adjust and you need increased accountability on? How are you going to hold yourself accountable? How are you going to make it urgent? And what are the things in your life aligned with your values? What are your priorities? Do you have the right priorities? I'd love for you guys to think about this over the next week. Again, if you need something, because again, things that guide you through this, I find very helpful for me personally. I have the goal setting and future self workbook. So it'll help you get clear about what's important to you, where you want to go and where you are now, and setting some initial goals. If you're interested in that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm not seeing a ton of other questions in the live chat, but I appreciate all of you joining. I hope you have a fantastic Sunday going into your Monday, depending on when you're watching this. Can I post the videos later? Yes, absolutely, Ryan. I will be posting the full video. That'll be on YouTube, and I can send you the link. So anyone else that wants it, just let me know. Feel free to pass this along to someone who could benefit from this. I know a ton of people who are thinking about businesses and entrepreneurial ideas during this COVID time period. And it's so important to have some sort of structure as we move through this time. I think structure allows us to actually get more creative and be more productive. That's really a Jocko Willink thing. I think he says like structure equals or allows for creativity, something like that. I'll look it up. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day. Go crush it. Make it a great day. And I will talk to you later.